In 1897, the Sears Roebuck catalog gave 28 pages to guns and ammunition, rifles sold as plain dry goods, right between the sewing machines and the cook stoves. No form, no license, no age check at the counter, and none waiting at the post office either. A boy with a few dollars could mail a money order and have a rifle in the box. The cheapest went for $2.25. One cost no money at all. A boy earned it selling salve door to door. And the last one, the Army had already fought a war with and thrown away. So here's the count. 15 rifles that put a frontier boy behind a trigger, cheapest first. It starts with a single shot any farm kid could afford. It ends with the one the Army threw away, and one of these is probably in your family right now. Number 15, the Parlor rifle. And right away, the American myth breaks, because this one usually wasn't American. Most came off Belgian and French benches, cheap imports, a hardware counter sold for pocket change. The name goes back to a Frenchman, Louis-Nicolas Flaubert, 1845. He seated a lead ball on top of a percussion cap and made the first self-contained metallic cartridge anyone had ever fired. No powder, just the cap doing all the work. That little round is the great-grandfather of the .22 you can still buy today. Guns built around it were Flaubert guns in Europe. Over here they got friendlier names: the Parlor rifle, the saloon rifle, the gallery rifle. And they earned them, because with no powder behind the ball, the report was barely a pop. Quiet enough to shoot indoors, in a parlor, in a basement, in the back of a saloon, without the neighbors sending for the law. That's where plenty of American boys fired their first real cartridge. Not on some heroic frontier, standing in the parlor, plinking at a target tacked to a board with the whole family watching to see if he'd flinch. Number 14, the Stevens crack shot. $2.25, that's the number, in 1902. And it made the crack shot the cheapest rifle in the entire Stevens boys line. The favorite above it ran $4, the ideal $7. This was the bottom rung on purpose. J. Stevens Arms and Tool Company, out of Chicopee Falls, Massachusetts, built it to be the first real rifle a kid ever held. A single-shot .22, you worked with a lever down under the frame, the breech block swinging open for one cartridge at a time. And there's nothing accidental about one cartridge at a time. A single shot is a teaching gun. You get one round, you make it count, or you stand there and reload while the rabbit walks off. That isn't a shortcoming Stevens apologized for. It's the entire reason you hand a boy a single shot instead of a repeater. Stevens ran that side lever action clear to 1912, when they redrew it into the under-lever shape most collectors picture now. But the early crack shot, the $2 one, is the honest article. The rifle a farm family could put in a boy's hands without thinking twice about the money. Number 13, the Quackenbush safety rifle. And no, not the air gun. Henry Quackenbush made a famous line of air rifles too, and every collector watching just tensed up, so let's be clear. This is the real one, the .22 rimfire. Quackenbush was a Herkimer, New York man, trained at Remington, and he patented this rifle on February 23, 1886. He built it for exactly one reason: to be cheaper than everybody. The action's the clever part. The breech block swivels out to the right to take a cartridge, then swings back to fire, and the whole thing breaks down small enough to drop in a bag. He put it into production in 1893 and kept it running to 1920. And here's what tells you the market he was hunting. Quackenbush wasn't undercutting one rival. He priced this to undercut Hamilton, Ivor Johnson, Stevens, Remington, and Winchester, all of them at once, every company that wanted a piece of the money a boy could scrape together. When 5 gun makers are all fighting over the same boy's dollar, you're not looking at a toy market. You're looking at the biggest market there was. Number 12, the Stevens favorite. If any single rifle deserves to be called the default, it's this one. Stevens brought it out in 1893, $4 new by 1902, and then they simply never stopped building it. Over 1 million made before the line finally closed in 1939. 1 million. That is not a boutique gun for rich men's sons. That's the .22 that got everywhere. It ran a falling block action. Drop the lever, the block drops with it, and you lay a cartridge into the open breech. Martini style, strong and simple enough that a kid could learn to run it in the dark. Stevens chambered it 4 ways: .22 long rifle, the scarcer .22 Winchester rimfire, the .25 Stevens, and the .32 long. Here's the part a spec sheet won't tell you, and it's why 1 million of them sold. The favorite was good. Not good for the price, good. Accurate enough that grown men bought it and kept shooting it long after the boy it was meant for had outgrown everything else. That's why you still trip over one at every gun show in America. Number 11, the Stevens Little Scout. This is the rifle that gives the whole game away, because people assume boy's rifle is a label collector stuck on later, a bit of nostalgia. It isn't. Stevens put the Little Scout out in 1906, a small falling block single shot, hammer fired, and cocked as its own separate step, so a careless kid couldn't simply yank the trigger and have it go. Cheap, plain, a flat slab of wood for a stock on the first ones, and Stevens advertised it straight into the boys' magazines, American Boy itself, under the category heading Boy's Rifle. That's the tell. This wasn't a grown man's gun that boys happened to inherit. It was designed for a boy, priced for a boy, and advertised to a boy in the magazine that boy was already reading. 120 years ago, a rifle company ran a targeted ad campaign aimed at children, and nobody blinked because a rifle in a boy's hands wasn't a scandal. It was a chore he was finally old enough for. The Model 14 ran only a few years. The improved version, with a proper forearm, carried the name for decades after. Quick one, before we climb up out of the $2 rifles. If you can tell a crack shot from a favorite at 10 feet, or you learned to shoot on one of these and never quite forgot it, then do 2 things for me right now. Hit the like button and subscribe. That's the whole ask, and it's what tells YouTube to put this in front of the next old shooter who'd want it. Now, back up the ladder. Number 10, the Remington No. 4 rolling block. Now we step off the Stevens bench and over to Remington's in Ilion, New York. The rolling block was Remington's famous action, the one that armed soldiers and buffalo hunters. A heavy iron breech block you rolled back with your thumb to load. For the boy's rifle, they took that exact action and shrank it. The smallest rolling block the company ever made, out in 1890. So a farm kid with a .22 was working the same motion, the same lockup, as a man holding a rifle that could put down a bison. Same gun, a fraction of the size. They chambered it in .22 short, long, and long rifle, some in .32 rimfire, and built around 350,000 of them before the line closed in 1933. The first ones were solid frame. Then, around 1901, Remington added a takedown, so you could break it in half and carry it easy. It was never the cheapest gun on this list. It was something a boy valued more. A real Remington, built like the grown-up ones, only his size. Number 9, the Remington No. 6. This one's a short lesson in what happens when giants go to war over pocket change. Remington put the No. 6 out in 1902. A little takedown single shot, 20-inch barrel, .22 or .32 rimfire, walnut stock, blued or case hardened if you had a nickel of pride to spend. It started at $5. Then Remington cut it to $4, then $3.50. Then by 1907, $3 flat. Watch that number fall, 5, 4, 350, 3, inside one rifle's own catalog run in 5 years. That's not a sale. That's a knife fight. Stevens, Remington, Winchester, Hamilton, all of them clawing to be the rifle a boy could actually afford, and the boy won every time the price dropped another 50 cents. They built close to 500,000 number 6s before it was done. 500,000. And that number's so big for the same reason the price got so small. Each maker would rather sell a boy a $3 rifle than watch the boy next door sell him one first. Number 8, the Hamilton Model 27. And this is the one I'd bet you've never heard, so stay with me. C.J. Hamilton and Son, Plymouth, Michigan, built the Model 27 from around 1898. And here's the thing, most of the boys who owned one never paid a cent for it. Hamilton didn't sell the bulk of these rifles to boys at all. They wholesaled them by the crate to companies that had a job for a kid. You may have seen the ads, the backs of comic books, the corners of newspapers, for something called cloverine salve, a tin of medicated ointment. And the pitch, aimed dead at boys from about 1906 on, was this: sell our salve door to door, hit your number, and we ship you a rifle. Free. So here's the actual transaction. A boy doesn't ask his father for a gun. He signs up, takes a case of salve tins on credit, and works his own town, knocking every door, making the pitch, collecting the coins, keeping the ledger. He runs a small business alone, and he's a child. And when he's sold enough salve, a real working .22 arrives in the mail with his name on it. He didn't buy that rifle, he earned it. And I'd argue there's no gun on this entire list a boy was ever prouder to carry. Number 7, the Winchester Thumb-Trigger. This is where a company got strange on purpose. Winchester brought this single shot out in 1904, and it has no trigger, none. Instead, there's a button on the back of the bolt, right under where your thumb rests, and you press it straight down to fire. Thumb-Trigger. The design credit belongs to Winchester's Thomas Bennett. Though the story goes, the seed of it was John Browning wondering just how simple and how cheap a .22 could be made if you threw out every part you didn't strictly need, starting with the trigger. And Winchester sold it 2 ways. 1, as a boy's rifle, dead simple, nothing to fumble. 2, and this is the part that stays with me, as a rifle for men who'd lost fingers and couldn't work a normal trigger anymore. Same gun, both markets. 18-inch barrel, .22 short, long, and extra long, and Winchester moved about 75,000 of them, some as far as Australia. They renamed it the Model 99 in 1920. It's the oddball of the list, and it's proof that a boy's first rifle was a real enough market that Winchester would strip a gun down to almost nothing to win it. Number 6, the Winchester Model 1890. Now we leave the single shots behind because this one's a pump. Work the slide, it throws the empty and feeds a fresh round. Work it again, as fast as you can rack it. John and Matthew Browning designed it, patent granted in 1888, and Winchester rolled it out in 1890 as their first slide-action rifle ever, built to replace an earlier rimfire nobody had wanted. This one people wanted, around 849,000 made, right up to 1932. But here's where the 1890 earned its nickname. Chamber it for the .22 short, and it became the gun of the shooting gallery. Every carnival midway, every arcade, every county fair, with a row of tin ducks and a barker taking your nickel. For decades. That's why the old-timers call it the gallery gun. It taught a lot of boys to shoot without a single one of them ever calling it a lesson. Number 5, the Winchester Model 1906. Because the 1890 was wonderful, and the 1890 was too expensive for a lot of families. That handsome octagon barrel cost real money to cut. So in 1906, Winchester built the same idea, cheaper, round barrel instead of octagon, takedown only, straight .22 rimfire. All the pump gun fun of its older brother, at a price a working family could reach. And it worked. Around 800,000 made in the 26 years they built it, nearly matching the gun it came from. This is the pattern you keep seeing on this list. Winchester, Remington, Stevens, none of them were charities. They didn't build boys' rifles out of sentiment. They built them because there was a boy in nearly every house in America. That boy wanted a rifle badly. And whichever company could shave $1 off the price sold 100,000 more guns. The 1906 is what that arithmetic looks like in walnut and steel. A fine pump gun with everything expensive stripped off it. So the family down the road could afford one too. Number 4. The Marlin Model 1897. Now we're talking about the gun a boy wanted and usually didn't get. Everything so far has been cheap on purpose. $2, $3, $4. The Marlin 1897 out of New Haven, Connecticut cost $15.35. Set that against a $3 Remington and you understand the entire social order of the schoolyard in one number. This was no starter. This was a lever action .22, a little brother to the big Winchester and Marlin lever guns the men carried. Same swing of the hand, same feed of fresh round without ever taking it off your shoulder. It came down from Marlin's earlier lever .22s, the 1891 and the 1892. The 92 a clever thing that could fire rim fire or center fire depending how you fed it. And the 1897 is the one they polished into a jewel. For most boys, it was the rifle in the catalog you only stared at. The graduation gun, the someday gun, the one you got if your father had a good year and decided you'd earned it. And a boy who did get one never handed it back. He kept it his whole life, which is exactly why they cost real money now. Number 3, the Winchester 1873 and its younger brother, the 1892. Everything up to now, a boy learned on. This is what he graduated to when the shooting stopped being for fun. The 1873 was the family rifle. The 44-40 on the pegs by the door, the gun you actually reached for when there was a wolf in the stock or worse coming up the road. It launched in 1873 at $50, which was a fortune. But watch what happens. By 1891, that same rifle had fallen to $19.50. Winchester built over 720,000 of them. Now, the myth, because you've been waiting for it. You've heard the 1873 called the gun that won the West. Here's the truth. Nobody on the frontier ever called it that. That line was written in 1919, a full generation after the frontier was gone, by a Winchester engineer named Edwin Pugsley for an advertising campaign. Back when the gun was genuinely new in 1875, Winchester's own ad called it the hunter's and sportsman's favorite and didn't even bother to print the model number. The 1892, John Browning's design, took over the same job and the same calibers, the 44-40, the 38-40, the 32-20, and Winchester built better than 1 million of those. These weren't a boy's rifles, they were his family's. And the day he was finally trusted to carry one loaded was the day the household decided he was a man. Number 2. The Winchester 1894 and its rival, the Savage 1899. This is the deer rifle. This is the gun a boy carried the first autumn. His father decided he could be trusted alone in the timber with something that would kill a buck clean. Winchester brought the 1894 out at the end of that year and within a season chambered it for a brand new kind of cartridge, the 30-30, one of the very first small bore rounds in America designed for smokeless powder instead of black. No cloud of white smoke to give your position away. A round barrel carbine ran $17.50 in that first catalog. The 30-30 went on to swallow the whole line, and it's still dropping deer today, which tells you they got it right the first time. The Savage was a cleverer answer. Arthur Savage patented it in 1893, and it did two things the Winchester couldn't. It carried its cartridges in a rotary spool down inside the receiver with a little brass window on the side that counted your rounds down as you fired. And because the hammer was tucked away inside, it could safely stack pointed bullets nose to tail in that magazine, where a Winchester's tube would risk setting them off. About $20 new, chambered first for the .303 Savage. 2 rifles, 1 job, and a boy handed either one had crossed a line. He wasn't learning anymore. He was expected to bring something home. Number 1, the Trapdoor Springfield, and this one comes home from a war. The Trapdoor, the Model 1873 4570, built at the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts, was the rifle the United States Army issued its own soldiers. It's the gun that fought the Indian Wars. And by the very start of our window, it was already obsolete. The Army had gone to the bolt-action Krag in 1892 and left tens of thousands of trapdoors stacked in government warehouses as surplus. So here's how the Army's own rifle reached a boy's hands. In 1903, after a push from Secretary of War Elihu Root and the NRA, the government created the National Board for the Promotion of Rifle Practice. The purpose was plain: teach American civilians to shoot military rifles in case the country ever needed them able to. They started a national match, let civilians compete by 1904, and by 1905 began selling surplus service arms, the old trapdoors, the Krags, to civilian rifle clubs across the country. Now be precise about this, because it matters. It went through the clubs, not to some boy off the street. A father joined the local rifle club, an older brother did, and a boy came up through it and put his hands on a rifle the Army had carried into battle and then decided it was finished with. Think about where this list began. A $2 single shot in a mailbox, no questions asked. It ends here, with the only rifle on it that came with any strings at all. And even those strings were nothing more than a rifle club at the edge of town. So that's a ladder, 15 rifles, from a $2 Belgian single shot to the United States Army's own castoff. And here's the thing to carry out of it. There was no trick to it. A frontier boy learned to shoot because the rifle was cheap and close and legal and sitting in the catalog between the sewing machines, and because his family expected him to. No paperwork, no questions, just a kid, a single shot, and a rabbit that wasn't going to wait. Now it's your turn, because a lot of these guns are still out there, in a closet, over a mantel, handed down and half forgotten. If one of them is yours, a Stevens favorite, a little Remington single shot, your grandfather's 4440 with initials cut into the stock, tell us in the comments what it is and who carried it first. And if the real hardware of the frontier is what you come here for, the guns behind the myths told straight, that's this whole channel, so subscribe. And if this one was worth your time, hit the like button before you go. See you on the next one.